Live. Hello, welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Testers. I'm a licensed therapist, but this is not therapy for very, very many reasons. And with me, as always, hopefully from now on, is Marie. You want to introduce yourself real quick, Marie?
Hi there, everybody. My name is Marie Moran. I am one of the new executive functioning coaches with effective artistry. I'm originally from Ireland, but I've been living in Scotland for 11 years. Nice to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you. 11 years, that's a long time.
Yeah.
I've been in Chicago, Chicagoland area, 13 years now. I feel like at that point it's just home for me. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah. Sometimes. Sometimes I get pretty homesick.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering, like, at what point did it switch into being like, no, this is where I'm from now? I don't know when that would have been. Just crept up on me.
Yeah, it kind of crept up on me too. Probably about 6-7 years ago. But, I get itchy feet, so I could see myself leaving soon.
I tell my wife I've always had a fantasy of being like, just quick note, I'm working from home today because there's a lot of illness going around in my family, not COVID, thankfully. But I don't want to bring in whatever it is that we have, whatever cold or whatever, to the office. So hopefully the internet holds up. It should. I've been messing with it to make sure that it does, but let me know if anything goes off. No, I've got that wanderlust too. I don't know. I think it is an ADHD thing for sure too, of like, I've always just wanted to be like, every 6 months, let's move to a new country. Let's just stay with like random friends all over the world and have adventures.
Yeah. And then sometimes the urge takes me to just go walk into the woods and stay there for a while.
Now that I think might be more the autism thing.
Yeah, I think so.
We, as Marie mentioned, we have a small group practice, effective artistry. We do therapy, individual, couples, group, family therapy. We also do executive functioning coaching with our coaches like Marie. And then this is not therapy hour, very much not therapy, just a conversation. Can be questions and answers, can be whatever. We're just chatting. I kind of think of it like open office hours, like a way to make ourselves accessible. And every week we pick a theme, and you'll have to remind me, hyperfocus, hyperfixations. Is that the theme this week?
This week's theme is hyperfocus and hyperfixations. Hyperfocus is a term I hear a lot from my ADHD friends. But I have a feeling that everybody uses it slightly differently. So it'll be nice to dig into it a little bit today.
Yeah, so many of these terms, and it's not just in like the realm of neurodiversity, all these terms in like mental health and things generally are very, like, what exactly is dissociation versus depersonalization versus derealization? And of course there are like official definitions, but people don't use the words exactly in line with what the official definitions are,
Yeah. Language is fluid.
But yeah, what was that?
Language is fluid.
Yeah. Language is a living thing.
Yeah.
That's why I would say, like, it is useful and important to define our terms. I think it really is very important to define the terms that we're using, but also to know that we're not defining that for all usage, everyone, everywhere, that if somebody else says it or uses it differently, they're wrong, is not the point. The point is that for purposes of this conversation, for understanding and communicating in these interactions, we're going to use it this way. It's also valid to use it any other way.
Yeah.
In linguistics, just as like a, brief kind of rule of thumb, I suppose, if native speakers say it, then it's correct. That's the rule. Anything that native speakers say is correct usage of the language.
I like that. That simplifies it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So we have questions. I haven't even looked at the questions. I'm so glad to have you here. I'm just relying on you to throw things out to me. Hyperfocus and hyper. Oh, the last thing I want to say is, if you're here, we don't have to stay on this topic. We're bad at staying on topic anyway, as it is. But if you're here and you're in the chat, we'll go wherever you want to go. We just pick topics so that we can inquire questions ahead of time and have some general like way of setting expectations. But the people who are here get priority. I think that's everything I need to say.
Yeah, great. So my first question, I'm glad we're talking about it this week actually, because this came up in last week's stream and I said, I don't hyper focus. And then I thought about it for 5 minutes and I realized, yeah, I do. And sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's negative. So yeah, really glad to be talking about it this week. First question is, what is hyperfocus? What is hyperfixation? Are they the same thing? Can those terms be used interchangeably, or are they completely different?
I would say that the terms are Venn diagram. They definitely can be used interchangeably, but they can mean different things. So just as a fun little, because I like language and I'm a nerd that way, hyper means extra, hypo means not enough, right? So hypersensitivity means you are more sensitive to that than the average person. Hyposensitivity means you're less sensitive to that. So hypothyroid, not enough. Hyperthyroid, too much. So hyperfocus and hyperfixation are a little bit of misnomers in that way, or at least they're not always used that way, because technically they should mean you're too focused, you're too fixated. But that's not usually how people use them. I don't know if usually is the right word. Hyperfocus is a state of being, right? Focus itself is a state of being. Focus as a like, when we talk about focus, you got to focus on something. It's not an active process. It's not something that you can attach. You can't make yourself focus on something. What you're trying to do is prevent yourself from engaging with any other things. And if you're trying to focus on something, anything else that's catching your attention, you would probably call a distraction or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But as far as the attentional processes of the brain, there's no distinguishing that stuff. It's just where your attention is trying to go. So focus is, I think, generally a problematic term because we talk about it as though it's something you can do. I can make myself focus, when all you're really doing is stopping yourself from engaging with anything else. But hyperfocus means that you aren't being distracted by anything else, that your attention is going either in whole or at least in a massive amount. You know, most of your attention is going to whatever thing you are hyper-focused on. And so it's not really too focused. Sometimes that's a problem. Certainly, we've talked a lot about like deprioritized interoception. That's my 1-year-old. Sorry. Very distracting. He's cute. You know, I think about him. What were we saying? I totally lost my train of thought.
We talk about deprioritized interoception.
Oh, right. Like if I am, for example, hyper-focused on a video game, which is, you'll hear people use that a lot, or hyper-focused on a hobby, that I'm paying so much attention to that I don't have any attention left over to notice that I need to eat or drink water and I forget. Or I don't have any attention left over to remember that I was supposed to go pick up somebody from someplace 2 hours ago. I just lose track of it, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's really what we're talking about with hyperfocus is of my total available attention, the vast majority of it, if not all of it, is going to one thing. Mm-hmm. I'm getting a lot of like granular detail, a lot of in-depth about this thing, probably over a longer period of time than usual. Where hyperfixation certainly can be used to mean that same thing. But hyperfixation is more about your relationship to a thing than it is a state of being. So when I am focused in like that, that's hyperfocused. But I can be hyperfixated on something and not actively be engaging with or thinking about or paying attention to it right now. Like I can be hyperfixated on my to-do list, even though right now I'm talking to you.
So again, does that come back to attention then? Because part of your attention is being directed elsewhere.
Yeah, could be. And again, this is where I'm trying to address how it seems that people use the term.
Yeah.
Hyperfixation in a lot of ways is very similar to special interest, the way that the term special interest is used in autism circles. Although I would say that hyperfixation seems to be talked about in like, you know, I hyperfixate on something for a few weeks and then move on to a new hyperfixation for a few weeks, where special interest, I might, you know, be on that thing for my whole life.
Okay. So hyperfixation is like me when I have ADHD and I'll pick up a hobby for 3 weeks and then forget it exists. I'll buy all the stuff and I'll get really into it and then I'll forget it exists and I'm on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. A version of that for me when I was a kid that I think is probably common is there's some new game coming out and I'm spending like every day I'm checking for news and like, oh, that new class, that looks so cool. And whatever, before fourth edition D&D was released, I spent like 6 months, probably a couple hours a day reading about fourth edition coming out in 6 months from now. Right. And then it comes out and then I engage with it and play it and explore it in depth as much as I want to. And then 2 weeks later, I'm done.
Wow. So now I'm wondering if when you hyperfixate on stuff, it loses its novelty value faster than if we didn't have a tendency to hyperfixate on something.
It could be. I mean, I have a couple personal theories here, but this is certainly not like documented research stuff or whatever. I think for one, at least from my personal experience, a lot of this has to do with puzzle, like mystery and problem solving. That if I can't really answer all the questions I need answered, I'm only getting drips and drabs of information. But then I use those things to kind of extrapolate and come up with theories about, oh, I think it might be this. Like a book series, for example, maybe this isn't a common example. I feel like it is. But if I'm reading a book series and I get real into it and then I catch up and I have to wait for the new book, then I'm going to spend a lot of the time while I'm waiting talking with other people who are also reading that and coming up with our theories of what's going to happen next and what this might mean. Whereas if I'm reading a series that's completed, I still might hyperfixate on it and read through the whole thing, but then it's done and I'm not as interested in talking about it and theorizing. If you started watching Game of Thrones when there were only 2 or 3 seasons, then you might do a lot of theory making and
that's exactly what I was thinking about. I was going to say, like, all the subreddits that popped up around Game of Thrones and how active they were even between seasons, not just while the show was on.
Yeah. So I think that's part of it in some cases, is that the part of the fun is in, ooh, give me one new piece of information and I'm going to try and extrapolate as much as I can off of that.
Yeah.
I think another thing that happens for us a lot of the time is when we're thinking about something that we can't actually do yet, whether that's because, like in my example, it's a game that hasn't been released, or these days, for me, it'll be things that I could do at any time, except that I'm way too busy, right? So if I start thinking about, oh, I gotta, do some research and figure out a way to fix my internet issues at home, it's hard for me. This is commonly talked about with ADHD. It's hard for me to sit down and do that in a 5-minute spurt. Like when I have 5 minutes, check one review of one thing and then remember the next day when I have 5 minutes to check another review. I need half an hour or an hour to just like get in depth and explore it. And because I don't have a half an hour or an hour, my brain's trying to like do it in little pieces or remind me, hey, don't forget, you got to do that thing. And so it stays top of mind until I get to actually sit down and do it and explore it. And then I get all I need out of it and I'm done.
Okay. So hyperfocus is then it's in that state of doing, and hyperfixating is, I guess, thinking and thinking and thinking about the doing.
Yeah. I mean, hyperfixating, I guess you could hyperfocus on something that is also your hyperfixation.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So hyperfocus is like the experience of, in this moment, my attention is dedicated to this thing. Hyperfixation is more a way of saying, here is this thing. And while I might not be actively engaged with it, I am thinking about it a lot over a span of time. Some of that time I might be hyperfocused on it. Some of the time I'm doing other things, but I still keep coming back to thinking about this.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. Hyperfocus is like something that lasts for a day or less, where hyperfixation can last for weeks or months.
Mm. Is it the same experience for kids as for adults? Do we experience these things the same way? Is everybody different? Yeah.
I would guess no, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I would guess no only because typically, at least in our culture, children have more of an opportunity to dedicate their resources to one singular thing or a few things, where adults tend to have a lot more things coming at them. I've got, if nothing else, like 14 different bills to pay every month, even though it's all on auto pay at this point, right? Like I've got how many employees and friends, people call me from all different directions, where my 3-year-old is much more able to just sit down and do puzzles on the floor for 4 hours at a time, She
Yeah.
actually used to do a long time just doing puzzles.
Yeah, I remember how nice it was to be able to just lose yourself in something like that. So yeah, it must be slightly different as a kid.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that is intrinsic to the experience of being a child versus being an adult, and how much is contextual. And I don't know that it's, I'm just kind of talking from personal experience, anecdotal experience. But certainly, I don't know. There are times where I miss the days where I could just sink into a book. Like, there were times in my life when I was younger where I would just literally, there have been days where I woke up, picked up the book that was on the floor next to my bed, started reading it, didn't stop reading it except to eat or use the bathroom until it was tired,
Same. Yeah.
There's a part of me that misses being able to indulge that, for sure.
Yeah. I guess that brings me to another.
Just like,
yeah.
Oh no, please. I think we got off. I think my internet is acting up and we got unsynced. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned, reading until you needed to get up and eat or drink or go to the bathroom. That's the point at which hyperfocus becomes tricky, right? When you start forgetting to do those things and you're so absorbed in something that you forget to do those things.
Yeah, and it can be forgetting to do anything. I mean, we're talking about the interoception kind of like body stuff, but if I was supposed to call somebody at a certain time and I forgot to do that, that's also a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which actually is what I was starting to say too, as a little side note, is when you're talking about, because people will throw around the word addiction a lot, like I'm addicted to this, they're addicted to that. If you're ever looking at like trying to assess, I have lots of thoughts on using that word. I don't like that word generally, unless we're talking about like actual physical dependency. But if you are going to use that word and talk about it that way, the questions that matter are things like, does the way in which you engage with the thing that you're worried about, you're worried you're addicted to social media. So does the way in which you engage with social media cause you significant problems in other elements of your life, would be one of the questions. And then the other big one would be, are you engaging with it more than you want to be? You have made an active decision and you're making effort to do less of it, and you've been unable to lessen it. Because to somebody in a different context, there was a time in my life where, it was completely normal for me to play 3 to 6 hours of video games on a day, and it wasn't a problem. If I were to do that now, that would cause a lot of problems. I don't have that much free time. So there's not like a static X amount is too much. It's relative to all the other stuff going on in your life, which I think is important, especially for neurodivergent people. Otherwise, we get feeling guilty about engaging with anything that we like.
Yeah.
Because we think it's too much.
Yeah, we always worry about being too much and doing too much. And
couldn't be me. I know I'm just going to be too much.
Yeah, it's nice to be a bit extra sometimes. So I was going to ask, you mentioned assessment then. Are hyperfocus or hyperfixation part of official diagnostic criteria, or is it just something that neurodivergent communities have sort of would shared about it, or is it part of the diagnostic criteria for autism?
So it is not part of the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. In fact, some people, misinformed or not well-informed people, will take hyperfocus and use it as an example that disqualifies somebody from an ADHD diagnosis.
Okay.
It's not uncommon to hear things like, sure, they struggle focusing on all their schoolwork and whatever, but they play their video games for 5 hours at a time. So obviously they can focus. So it's not ADHD, it's just lack of motivation or whatever, which is completely incorrect and nonsensical. So in that case, yes, that if you talk to anybody who knows, right, including professionals and diagnosticians, they will talk about the hyperfocus thing, that ADHD brains might be disinterested or hard to focus, but then it sometimes will be very, very focused. But it's not part of the official criteria. For autism, special interests, I forget the exact terms that they use, but persistent interest in something, narrow scope, something like that. But yes, special interests are part of that criteria. Of course, with all the diagnostic criteria, it's all stuff like 6 out of the following 12. None of this is you must have every single piece of it. And then with any of the other things that you might qualify as neurodivergent diagnosis, then attentional issues aren't part of that. Yeah, I think I had a 3-year-old knocking on my door, but then he just... So yeah, that's as far as diagnostic criteria is concerned. Nothing more infuriating than when I've heard people be like, yep, we ruled out ADHD because they can focus on horseback riding for 5 hours at a time or whatever thing it is that they like to do.
Yeah, well, you graduated college, so you were able to study, so you couldn't possibly have ADHD. You hear that a lot.
I mean, just conceptually, if ADHD was theoretically something that meant you could never pay attention to anything under any context for any duration of time, it would be a completely it is a disability, but it would be a completely disabling condition. It would mean you couldn't do anything, literally anything. Yeah. So obviously there are patterns by which you struggle with it and then sometimes engage with it. The super common, I put off my work, and then last minute, I do nothing but work for 24 hours straight right before the deadline kind of thing. There's a lot of where you get into overlap with bipolar as well, which some people will argue is neurodivergent, some people will argue it is not. I would say, I think we don't need to get into my thoughts on what neurodiversity and neurodivergence is, I guess. I'm just saying there is a lot of overlap in that pattern with what people will talk about as bipolar then.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I know I keep coming back to ADHD and autism because these are my experiences, but I guess hyperfocus and hyperfixations aren't exclusive to those conditions either. They probably pop up.
Not at all. And they're not exclusive to conditions broadly. Everybody is kind of everybody forgets their keys sometimes. These are universal experiences. There is nothing in the DSM that is static, binary, like you either experience it or you don't. It's about the ways in which you experience it, how frequently, how intense is it, what impact does it have on your life, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, everybody has gotten into a good book. Well, not everybody, but I'm saying if you like reading, at some point in your life, you have gotten into a good book and read for 6 hours straight and been like, wow. Or video games comes up a lot because it is a very common one of even people who don't enjoy video games as like a regular hobby. Like my mom, for example, does not play video games and will always talk about one time she tried when I was young. We all liked it. She tried playing video games one time and she felt like she was playing for a half an hour and she looked up and it had been 3 hours and she's like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. It's dangerous. We all lose the time sometimes.
Yeah. So I guess then the question is it a problem for you? And if it's a problem, what can we do about it? Yeah.
Well, and what comes up a lot in ADHD communities, right, is people saying, how do I engage my hyperfocus mode? Like, I know I get into this mode. How do I make myself get into this mode so that I can do it? I think largely that's a little bit of a backwards way of looking at it. It's not that you're in hyperfocus mode and whatever's put in front of you when you're in that mode, you will hyperfocus on. Getting into hyperfocus is about the relationship you have to whatever thing it is that you're hyperfocusing on. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So for me, social media can be something I can get lost in for a while. And sometimes I would blame my meds. I've taken my meds and I'm looking at my phone at the wrong minute and my meds have kicked in and now I can't stop scrolling. But It's because I'm engaged with conversation with other people, and that's what I'm enjoying, and I'm getting a little boost out of that. Maybe it's a dopamine boost again, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the experience.
Yeah.
It's when it's when it interferes with what I'm doing that then I'm like, okay, I have to stop. I have to change something here.
Yeah. Well, and again, this is where, so I talk about this a lot with parents, but this is good for us all to explore. Trying to cut off the best option, the preferable option, because it causes problems, is a losing game. Things will just get worse and worse and worse and worse. If you don't like what's happening, you got to give a better option. So, for example, like you said, Marie, there's something there's a role that your engagement with social media is playing in your life. And if you then miss something else and you misattribute your having missed that other thing to social media, and therefore you try to cut yourself off from social media, it's not going to go well. Because you need it's doing something for you. Unless you find some other way to meet that need, there's going to be some need going unmet until you re-engage with social media. It's not about what it is that you were doing while you missed the other thing. It's that you weren't thinking about the other thing.
Yeah.
It's not that we need to take away the stuff that's more interesting to you. It's we need to make that stuff more urgent or important or interesting or give you reminders or whatever.
Yeah.
Just trying to limit things. I hate like screen time limits. It's the worst idea in the world. You're just setting yourself up for fights with yourself, with your kids, whoever you're trying to limit. Instead, you focus on, here's the important stuff. Let's make sure all that gets done. As long as all that gets done, whatever you want to do with the rest of your time is fine. Not, you can only have 2 hours on screens, because then there are going to be times where you got 2 more hours and nothing to do, but you just can't do the thing that you're thinking about. Like, I think this is part of that hyperfixation thing, is if I am really thinking about something I'm wanting to engage with, but being prevented from engaging with it, then that takes more and more and more of my cognition, more of my attention and awareness goes to thinking about the thing. And we all know this. Like,
yeah,
if there's something you really want and someone's like, no, you can't have it, do you just
That's
be like, oh, okay, fair enough, let me go? No, you're like, you try to figure out how to get it, or it just gets worse.
Yeah.
Which this is kind of my backdoor way of getting into, stop trying to focus on things. Everybody, it's the worst. Your brain is distracted, meaning it's paying attention to something else. It's doing that for some reason. It might not actually be helpful. Of course, it might be ridiculous and, irrelevant and whatever. But if you're just trying to say, nope, I will not move from this desk, I'm not going to go check and see if I left the oven on or not, I don't need to worry about it, I'm sure I'd already turned it off. When if you just go and check, it takes 2 minutes to go check and get back. You spend how much of your time and energy being like, no, I'm sure it's fine. Stop. Why am I worried about? And then you go cycling. Get looping. Just let yourself walk away. You need to walk away.
Yeah. So there's a point at which it becomes a negative experience.
Sure.
And beating yourself up isn't going to fix it. So making other things more interesting, making other things more urgent. How does that work?
Well, this is, in actionable terms, we're getting into this is like the most common advice for ADHDers especially, but set alarms, set reminders for yourself. Basically, create something when you're thinking about something that needs to be done, but not able to actually do it in that moment. Create something external that will remind you. And optimal is that it will remind you in some way that calls your attention. You don't even have to remember. So a to-do list, for example, if I'm thinking about it, but I can't do it, I can put it down, but I have to remember to check the to-do list later. Whereas an alarm on my phone, as soon as I put it down, I can forget about it completely, because then it will beep, beep at me and call my attention when it needs to happen. So external, preferably that it will call your attention without you having to remember it at all. And then ease. If it's easiest for you, like if you can have a smartwatch and you can just quickly, or into your phone, use your voice assistant, your smart assistant on your phone to make a quick alarm or whatever, the easier the better. The more complicated it is, the more likely it is that when you think of it, you'll not only not be able to do it, but you also won't be able to set the alarm or whatever kind of a thing it is that you need to be doing.
Yeah, and working memory is an issue for us ADHDers anyway. So the more of that stuff we can get out of our heads, the better. I learned this from being coached by you, because I just kept making lists and then not checking the lists. And, now I lean into that, using voice notes and Alexa and all that kind of stuff. And it has changed things for me.
Yeah,
Here's your reminder, do this at 11 a.m. instead of scrambling around on my desk for a piece of paper that I used on Monday and just getting
yeah.
lost.
I mean, in the same way that like very common advice for neurodivergent people at this point is try an audiobook instead of reading. Same thing for outgoing, like try voice to text. Try something that allows you to speak and then it transcribes it for the exact same reason that an audiobook might work better for you than reading.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, it just doesn't get thought about in that reverse way. I'll say too that making to-do lists can be helpful even if you don't ever go back to them. That writing things down serves, again, different functions. One of those functions is as a reminder, yes, I've got a to-do list and I'm going to come back and check it again and do the thing. One is as an organizer, not only to remind me what to do, but I'm going to kind of put it at a certain time. I'm planning it, to do it this day or at this point or whatever. Another is just to organize it conceptually.
Yeah.
That I've got too much in my head. I'm feeling overwhelmed and like, oh gosh, I got so much on my plate. I don't even know what all it is. And I just need to get it down on paper so I can see it all in front of me and kind of organize it a little bit. And then if I never look at the paper again, doesn't matter. It already served that function of just, let me walk through everything and make sure I'm not missing anything. Because sometimes people beat themselves up over, I keep making lists and I lose them. No, you did it for a reason. You don't have to go back and check it later. Like note taking too. If you take notes, but you don't ever go back and look at them, that doesn't mean they didn't do anything for you.
Yeah, it helps you process your thoughts. So I think just for me, for particularly when we're talking about hyperfocus, having that little ping or having that voice reminder helps to pull me out of whatever it is I'm focused or hyper focused on, and bring me back to reality, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, and some of my most generic but very actionable advice for people is take your phone, turn off all push notifications, and then go back and turn on the ones that you want. Make it opt in, not opt out.
Yes.
And they make it harder to do that as time goes. It used to be you could just say turn off all push, and now you have to go through the list and turn off each individual one. But the question is, do I want this thing to make me think about it, even if I don't want to think about it? Because anything else on your phone, if you want to think about it, you can just open it up and look at it. It's only stuff that you might not be, thinking about something else that you want it to be able to interrupt you and say, hey, pay attention to this. And then whatever thing you're using for your alarms or reminders, use a tone, use a sound, or whatever you're using that is different from anything else.
Yes.
My calendar, which is what I use to give me my 10-minute reminders and things like that, it uses a sound bite from the old Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time games. Hey, listen, which has probably been heard on stream many, many times.
Oh, wow.
Then you don't have to, as opposed to, that might have been a message, or it might have been a text, or it might have been a million different things. It's, that's something, I'm supposed to be at something in 10 minutes. I better check. And in particular, make it something that will wake you up from a nap. So that if you do tend to fall asleep, but that you're not going to miss it.
Yeah, I do that a lot, actually. If I'm going to take a nap, I set reminders before I take my nap. I don't sleep through stuff.
Because you see, the flip side of it is you can't relax if you don't. If you don't set something that will wake you up from a nap, then you just can't nap for fear of missing the thing.
And then hyperfocus, or that pleasurable feeling you get from hyperfocusing on something, becomes no fun because you're worried about missing all the stuff.
Yeah, and it happens less frequently. You can't sink into it because your brain is staying vigilant. Hyperfocus could be thought of as another way of talking about the same experience we talk about being in the zone or being in a flow state or having a peak experience. All of these things that more or less seem to describe when your attention, when your conscious like awareness is united and directed at something that is taking place in this moment right now. I'm not
You
thinking
just,
about yesterday or tomorrow or anything that isn't here. I'm thinking about the thing that I'm doing, and everything I'm thinking about is going to that. And it just starts to feel like, you ask people about being in the zone or peak experience, and they'll say it's like things are just happening. It's like I want to do something and I don't know how, but it just gets done. I'm flying, I'm floating, I'm skating, all this like ease and effortlessness. Sometimes we call it hyperfocus. And yeah, back to the beginning, usually when people are calling it hyperfocus, it's because they think it's bad.
yes, you anticipated my next question, which was going to be, what's the difference between hyperfocus and flow state? And I guess that's it, it's how we perceive it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have to like, I don't know, send 200 wedding invitations, you got to get them in the envelope and so whatever, and you got 2 hours to do it, and you get into that state where your brain just shuts off and it just happens. Would you call that hyperfocus? Probably not. But if you're doing something enjoyable, but that you feel a little guilty about doing something enjoyable, and while it's happening, something else that you thought you should have done or could have done or were supposed to do doesn't happen, then you might call it hyperfocus. It's usually not going to be if someone's like, hey man, you were supposed to call me 2 hours ago, where you been? I'm usually not going to say like, sorry, I was having a peak experience. I was in a flow state. Sorry, I was hyper-focused on that thing.
Yeah.
A
It
lot
is
of
something I think that we tend to beat ourselves up about. I mean, we as in ADHDers.
Yeah.
And we want to harness it and make it work for us. But yeah, that goes back to your point that it's something we really enjoy doing. I guess it can be a form of procrastination.
So this is great because this is multiple times now that you and I both have had the same thought to go in the same direction. Yes, it can. But again, all this language, a lot of it has to do with what we're centering. And when I say centering, I mean we're measuring something based on the presence or absence of some element, right? So if I ask you how you're feeling and you say not bad, then you're centering the bad, right? That the answer to how you're feeling is measured based in the presence of badness or the absence of badness, not the presence of goodness. If I ask you how you're doing, what's
I should
that?
point out, as an Irish person, that's the stock answer if somebody asks how you're doing. Not too bad. I don't know why that is. Why we
Well,
answer in the negative almost. Yeah.
it is a like fun little brain teaser
Linguistic
hobby of
word.
mine to
Yeah.
look at little linguistic quirks and then try to match them. Not look at like root causes, but do try to match them to like cultural things that correlate, right? So if a linguistic thing, if not bad, is the stock answer, then I would expect that people raised in that culture also have a hard time asking for help, for example, complaining about pain and difficulty that they're suffering, that unless things are really bad, they're not bad.
There's a saying, all right, there's nothing bad that could be worse. In other words, I'm having a rough time, but it could be worse.
I mean, not being Irish myself, that's kind of the stereotype that's
Yeah.
out there about Irish people is everything's pretty flat affect and, everything's pretty much going to be looking the same on the surface all the time, but then they'll go home and compose like epic poems about the futility of existence,
It has to come out somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we're talking about what we're centering, we're talking about what we're making most important, meaning what we're paying attention to. Is it bad or is it not bad? Instead of is it good or is it not good? And then coming back to what we're talking about with hyperfocus is what we're centering. Are we centering the things that we're not doing? I didn't do X, Y, or Z. And then I'm saying I didn't do X, Y, or Z because I was hyperfocused. Or am I centering the things that I am doing? In which case we're much more likely to talk about it as being in the zone or just enjoying myself or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I forget procrastinating.
Yeah.
All right. This is one
This
of my
is when
words.
it becomes a negative, I guess, if you're
Yeah, if
aware
you're
of it and you keep it up, you're not
right.
doing what you need to
Same
be
with
doing.
like escapism. Oh, I'm using video games as an escape. Nope, I've never heard anybody say I'm using gardening as an escape or I'm using baking as an escape, right? Like all you mean is you're doing something that you enjoy doing.
Yes.
What makes that an escape except that you're centering the things that you think you should be doing instead, and therefore it's bad that you're doing the video games. We should be doing things that we enjoy without feeling guilty about using them as an escape or a procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
But one of my, again, very common and generic, but because it's common, it's often helpful. Really investigate. What do you mean procrastinate? Actually, for you, Marie, when you say procrastinate, what do you mean?
For me, it's avoidance, really.
Meaning that you're thinking of
Avoiding something
or
that's
should do, but don't want to, and therefore avoid doing it.
something. Well, not necessarily something I don't want to do, but something maybe I don't feel able to do. But again, struggle to ask for help.
Well, I mean, if
Yeah.
we're expanding to that, which I like that definition, I would add even more that it's actually not a good idea to do it, even though I think I should do it right now. That doesn't get looked at a lot. But if we're expanding it out into not able to do, then why are we calling it procrastination?
Right.
Did you work out at 2 a.m. last night? No, I was asleep. Why are you procrastinating? Like we do different things at different times. So this is commonly helpful for people. If you keep procrastinating stuff and beating the crap out of yourself for procrastinating, but then you get them done before they're due at the last minute. I'm putting it off, procrastinate, but I do it at the last minute. And it gets done and it gets in and it's done well. Like if this is homework where we're frequently talking about this, if you put it off the paper until the last minute right at the night before, but then get an A, then what was the problem with the procrastinating?
I guess it's only a problem if it's affecting you, like if it's physically affecting you with stress or anxiety about not getting it done.
Which only happens if you think of it as procrastinating, right? If you
Yeah.
think of it as I planned to do this the night before, because that's how I work. I do it the night before. That's my plan. It's always worked. It is reasonable to expect, but that's how it will continue to work. And then you don't stress and feel terrible about procrastinating over the 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, then it really doesn't cause any problem. A lot of this, there is a tendency, because a lot of the relief that people experience when they get a diagnosis of ADHD, autism, dyslexia, whatever diagnosis they're getting, a lot of the time when people feel relief because of the diagnosis, that relief is attached to the idea of, oh, this is something about me that is bad in some way. It causes problems in some way, but it's outside of my control. It's biological. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
Which is great. But then we do have a tendency to pathologize things that don't necessarily need to be pathological, like being addicted or using something as an escape when we're just talking about doing something that you enjoy. It might cause problems, sure, but those problems can be addressed separately from whether or not it's okay to do a thing that you like doing. You don't have to say, I can't let myself. The number of people I have talked to who are like, oh, I started doing this thing and it was really helpful to me, so I had to stop right away because I have an addictive personality and I'm worried I'll get addicted later. So this is a person who is engaging in something they really enjoy and then giving it up for no reason well before anybody or anyone or anything has suggested that they need to. That's the person who's saying that they have an addictive personality?
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
We get in our heads about what we're bad at, what we're doing wrong, and then
Yeah.
we start seeing everything we're doing as a bad thing that isn't okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can procrastinate it until the last minute, get it done, and get the result, the outcome that you're looking for, name to me the bad thing about that. Whereas on the flip side, for example, school, we'll keep it focused on school. You go to school all day, you get home, I should do my homework right away so I don't stress about it for the rest of the night. I can just get it done and relax. That's like the common thing, right? Except maybe you don't. Maybe you don't get it done and you feel bad and what's wrong with me? And now I'm beating myself up. And then 4 hours later, 6 hours later, finally I get around to it. And now I've created a correlation in my mind of, yeah, I only do things at 10 o'clock at night because I'm so stressed about it. I almost swore, but I caught myself. So one of my most common like interventions with people early on will be, okay, give yourself permission to do it the way you've been doing it. Treat it as though it's not bad. You've been doing it that way and it's been working. Just plan on doing it at 10. See if it still works anyway. Because if it does, and it usually does, then it's not about the stress. If you don't need to stress for 6 hours to make yourself do it, you're not being, this is the most common thing for ADHDers is I'm motivated by stress, panic, urgency, whatever. Or maybe you're making an assessment of how long it takes to get done and when would be the optimal time to do it, and resting at times that your body and brain need some rest so that you can recover, because you just went to school for 7 hours and you had to focus and mask and do all this heavy intellectual labor. And yeah, if my friend is going out for a 15-mile run and right when they get back, I say, great, now we need to do this exhausting physical labor. Are they going to say, yes, we should do it right away, right when I just finished the other thing? No, they're going to say, all right, let me rest for a little while and then we'll come back to it. But if they think they should do it right away, and then they just can't, I'm sorry, I just can't motivate myself. I don't know what's wrong. I'm just really lazy right now. I can't get myself to do it. What's wrong with me? And then they end up doing it 6 hours later anyway. It's like, oh, yeah, I had to beat myself up for 6 hours to do it. No, you just, honestly, at the root of a lot of this, cognitive fatigue is a real thing. That's it. Yeah. People just don't believe, for some reason, we are totally fine with, oh, you pushed your body really hard. Your body needs some rest. But when we say you pushed your brain really hard, which is a part of your body, nobody's ever saying, yeah, your brain needs some rest.
And if you have like sensory processing issues, you're probably going to need more rest because you're dealing with all of that extra information that your brain is taking in from your environment.
Yeah, well, as compared to somebody else who went through the same, which is what would really happen is you just live a different pattern of a life, right? If you're more sensitive to common sensory input, then you would need more frequent breaks, or to be exposed to environments in which that sensation is overwhelming less commonly, less frequently, or whatever. Like one thing that's been bugging me a lot, especially over the last couple of years, but really the last month, 2 months, is people obsessed with how do I recover from burnout? How do I get back to how things used to be? How things used to be led to you being burnt out.
Yep.
Burnout isn't illness. Burnout is exhaustion. You get tired when you do too much. And you have an ability, as all humans do, to push yourself to keep doing stuff even though you're exhausted. So you keep doing it and you keep doing it, but you hit a wall. You run out. It's a limited ability to push yourself. Sooner or later, you can't push anymore.
Mm-hmm. And
then you're going to feel guilty and terrible about not doing what you used to do. You were doing too much. So I'm not saying stay in burnout by any means. Let's come out of burnout. But it's not, everything's fine. Burnout. I'm conceptualizing it like an illness or disease. Something's wrong with me. I got to fix it so I can get back to normal. It's things are going boop, 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 boop. And it's somewhere along that line, I hit a threshold and I'm going to call it burnout. And I need to get back above that line and then just chill there instead of pushing too hard and going down again.
Yeah. Maybe your new baseline is where you should have been all along.
Yeah. I mean, your body is a self-contained organism. I don't know what way to phrase it. It wants to survive. It is built to survive. And your brain is part of your body. It's not a separate thing. Your mind, your consciousness, you can make arguments that maybe that's got other stuff going on beside, but your brain is part of your body. It's a physical thing in your body. It relies on all the same biological mechanisms that every other part of your body rely on. For some reason in our culture, we have turned it into this mythical other thing that every other system in your body can be tired from use or overuse, but not the brain. You can just push through.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. And burnout, just like exhaustion or any of these other things, are your body and brain operating as designed. that at a certain point, no matter how badly you want to, you just can't keep going, because if you did, you would kill yourself. You're hurting yourself. And so systems engage and shut you down. I don't know. This is something I learned a long time ago, way back in high school. So maybe the science is updated on this. I don't know how accurate this is. But from what I learned, in cases of extreme sleep deprivation, if for whatever reason you just don't sleep for 3 days, 4 days, whatever, what will happen is local sleep, that certain regions of your brain start shutting down as though it's asleep for a few seconds at a time. And it's kind of scattershot.
Okay.
And of course, as far as like the experience of it goes, when we are in that place, each of us, we're just like, oh, I'm foggy, or oh, I can't seem to track things, or I'm losing things, or whatever. It's just, instead of your whole brain shutting down and repairing as it's supposed to do in sleep, little pieces of it are going at a time in ways that you can't really acknowledge. A lot of burnout or brain fog or any of these things could just be you need way more rest than you're getting.
Yep. This is all very familiar.
Yeah. Honestly, it's this cultural level gaslighting that I just hate, where for some reason the message is, you know how you feel tired? You're not. You're not really tired. If you think you are, you're wrong. Don't trust your own perception of fatigue, exhaustion, tiredness. That's just laziness.
Yeah, sleep is for the weak.
That's literally gaslighting, not overuse of the term. Is teaching people to disregard their own perception of reality. It's terrible.
And we have structured our world in a way that doesn't really work well with certain brains, certain neurotypes, as it were. Yeah.
I would say we've structured our world in a way that doesn't work well for any brain.
Anybody. Yeah.
Unless you happen to be a brain in a body that has access to massive amounts of resources, in which case, sure, yeah, this world is great. But ADHD or not, tell somebody to work for 8 hours straight doing data entry or going over legalese contracts or whatever. Nobody does that. It's not possible. Some people feel really guilty about not being able to do that. What's wrong with me? Why can't I focus on these contracts for 8 hours a day like I'm supposed to? Some people just don't give a crap. They're like, yeah, of course I'm not actually I know they say do it for you. I'm not going to. I'll do it.
This is what you talked about last week about missing the wink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of this is that stuff. This is part of why I hate the concept of neurotypicality, because it hurts the people who have that concept. If you think that everybody else does it easier, then you're just going to feel bad about how hard it is for you. Doesn't mean that it isn't harder for you. It just means, why do we need to spend so much time thinking about these theoretical people for whom it is easy? And if it is easy for them, have you considered that maybe it's easier for them because they're not doing it? Because the thing you think is easy for them, they're just not doing, and they're not even trying to, and they're not beating themselves up over it. It's just that you think it is.
Yeah. And it builds resentment as well. And I don't think that's helpful. I don't think it's helpful for the neurodivergent community either to feel resentful towards a whole sector of society who's completely blissfully ignorant of it.
Right. Honestly, neurodiversity is supposed to be a rejection of the medical model. The idea of some people are neurodivergent and some are neurotypical is just an evolution of the medical model. It's still, I'm built in a bad way that causes me problems, unlike everybody else who's awesome. Those jerks. Nah, we're different. And that doesn't mean that these aren't things. They are. They're valid ways of conceptualizing and helping people to be able to engage with things differently. Just let go of this idea that everybody else has it so easy. As best I can tell, the only thing that makes life easier in any kind of broad way is resources. Yeah. The more resources you have, the easier your life gets. Doesn't have to be about brain type or intelligence or work ethic or anything other than that.
Yeah, because then you can structure your world in a way that works for you. The more resources you have, the easier.
Do what you want when you want.
Yeah.
Because isn't that the ideal, right? For anybody. ADHD, autistic, anything. The ideal life to live would be whatever you want to do, you do it at any point because you're completely free to do whatever you would want to do at any point. And the only people who actually get to do that are the ones with so much money that they can do whatever the hell they want to do. So
what you're saying is we should eat the rich.
A little bit, yeah. Look, all of this other stuff, like people will come at me all the time with, did you see this study that says if you have 4 or more children, you're more likely to get Alzheimer's? Okay. Did you know that having more children also correlates with being poorer? And that being poorer also correlates with having a greater chance? That basically all these studies are this thing which correlates with having high resources correlates with something good. This thing which correlates with having low resources correlates with something bad. And we're coming up with these interim things as though it's anything other than that. I know we've taken down the marshmallow test a million times on this stream, but that's a good example because it is so foundational to the way that we run everything for our kids, for education. It's all based on this idea that being able to do something bad for no other reason than because somebody told you that you should and you'd be rewarded for it later on down the line, that the ability to comply with that is somehow good. We're going to call it delayed gratification and it leads to greater success. Literally saying that if you will do something that seems worse to you because I'm telling you it'll pay off later, that's good. Whereas if you don't do something that seems bad to you because I tell you it will pay off later, that's bad.
Sounds like the foundation of most major religions as well, right? The meek shall inherit the earth.
There's a reason that there's that. Religion is the opiate of the masses. And I'm not anti-religion by any means. No, I think meaning is incredibly important. I'm a huge fan of Viktor Frankl. Man's Search for Meaning is like his, primary text. I was going to say seminal text, but that's a weird word. I don't like that word very much. Which, by the way, and if anybody doesn't know, Viktor Frankl was a therapist, a psychotherapist. Existentialism, while we talk about it a lot in the philosophy of it, was originally conceptualized as a way of engaging with therapy, with helping people. Anyway, point is, it's about meaning, that you got to find meaning in the things that you're doing, whether those things are painful or pleasurable, because that was, Freud is all about the will to pleasure. Everything we do is in search of pleasure. And then Frankl was saying, no, everything we do is in search of meaning, because we do unpleasurable things all the time and feel good about it if it's meaningful to us. So yeah, you have to find meaning in what you're doing. And then if you're doing unpleasant things because they might pay off later, cool. But it's because it has meaning beyond just that you've been told to do it that way. Otherwise, we end up in this place where everybody's like, oh, it's okay for me not to do some ridiculous 40-hour-a-week work and intellectual labor that nobody does because I have ADHD, but those neurotypicals, it's so easy for them. No, it's not.
It's not, no.
Nobody does it. And if you're thinking that you're the exception, by the way, if you're listening to this and you're like, no, I actually sit and work 40 hours a week. First of all, you're definitely not neurotypical. Second of all, and what you're doing, you must really enjoy on some level, even though it's also draining. I do actually work from the moment I get to the office till the moment I'm done. It causes problems. I'm trying to change it so I don't run to the bathroom, literally sprinting down the hall every day. But I do it because what I'm doing is so enjoyable. I am hyper-focused on my work.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I'm still exhausted at the end of the day. It's still very draining and depleting because it's difficult, but I enjoy it. If you're working 40 hours a week and you don't enjoy your work, you're not hyper-focusing on your work, then you must be terrified of what will happen if you take a break. There's no other thing. Either you like it or you're terrified of what will happen if you don't do it. So there you go. Fictional person who's not listening to this, who might have thought that they were. Yeah. We didn't get through any of or not nearly all of our questions, did we?
No, but I've really enjoyed this because I think that, we probably need to reframe how we look at hyperfocus. If it's becoming a problem, then obviously speak to somebody and try to devise ways to make it less problematic. But as you say, add things that you find more interesting and more fun, rather than trying to quit something cold turkey just because you think it's bad to be doing it all day.
Yeah. If you have a problem with what somebody's doing, whether it's yourself or anybody else, if you think what somebody's doing is a bad thing for them to do, then offer them something better. Don't just try and take away the thing that they're doing, because they're doing it because it's the best option they have.
Yeah.
They might be wrong. There might be better options than shooting up heroin or whatever is possible, but then you find those better options and present them to them. You don't just tell them to stop shooting up heroin. And it's not that I think people should shoot heroin. I've never done it myself. It seems problematic from all the data and the science out there. It seems pretty clear that it's not a good choice long term. But what we're not comparing against, what we can't compare against, is each person who is using heroin, what would they be doing if they weren't? We're comparing them against people who aren't using heroin, not the hypothetical version of themselves that isn't using it. And how are you going to convince anybody that we're for sure that it would be better? Because at least in some cases, it's not going to be.
No. So again, it comes back to better options and resources and access to those resources.
Yeah. It's not just about what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do it unless you can explain why not. It's what you're doing serves some function for you. If it's bad, find better options to the extent you're able.
I think we're a little over time. I just have one other question just to touch on briefly. If you were looking for if you wanted to do something, if your hyperfocus or hyperfixations were doing something that you felt was harmful, would you recommend any techniques, therapeutic techniques, mindfulness, CBT, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, all those same things, basically anything that brings your attention away from, like CBT, mindfulness, those kinds of techniques, those tend to be about drawing your attention away from the cognitive environment and into the physical, like whether it's your body or the environment around you, whatever. Well, some hyperfocus is already in the physical environment, but same fundamental thing. We're just trying to draw the attention elsewhere.
Yeah.
But the point of hyperfocus is that you're so focused that it's hard to remember that you should draw your attention elsewhere. So best advice is build interruptions into your day. That it sucks. You don't like it. I don't want to be in the middle of, an hour or two of 4 hours of writing an email and have someone come in and bother me. I'm like, no, I got to get this finished. Except when I'm anytime other than that 4 hours, I'm going to say, yes, please interrupt me so I don't spend 4 hours trying to write an email. In the moment, I won't like it. So you have to structure interruptions into your day. And a lot of that happens automatically. There is some of that gets lost from the, communal working structure where everybody's working at home. You don't have those interruptions. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's not bad for an individual person or blah, blah, blah. But you might want to look at other ways to replace it. There's a reason that so many people got so into having pets and houseplants with the switch to working from home, because just something that's like, oh, well, my cat's interrupting me. Because if you didn't have your cat interrupting you, what else would?
Yeah.
So build some interruptions into your day and make it as easy as possible for yourself to come up with something else and shift into something else in those windows of clarity that you have of like, ooh, I should do some other thing. So that can be things like menus, which we use a lot, just what else could I do? What else should I do? Reminders and things are interruptions and guide you to other things. But interrupt yourself, make it easy to shift onto something else. You can always get interrupted and go back to what you were doing.
That I started a co-working group in lockdown for precisely this reason. Working from home was not working for me or for a lot of other neurodivergent people. And we structured it so that we ran Pomodoros so that none of us would end up in that hyperfocus. And there was always the host of the co-working session on Zoom would announce the start and end of the breaks. So you would gently pull people out of that hyperfocus state. And if they were really into something, they could just mute us so they didn't have to be interrupted. But it just helped people. And then I always kept a list at my desk of things I could do in a 5-minute break that would be physical. So I'd get up and load the washing machine, or I'd wash some dishes, or I'd do a few stretches and get me back into my body and out of my head for 5 minutes. I've come back to my work feeling refreshed. I know the Pomodoro technique doesn't work for everybody, but I found it helpful. I know a lot of other ADHDers find that quite helpful too.
Yeah, Pomodoro is it's kind of like the paint by numbers version of, pacing yourself. If you
Yeah.
just really don't have an idea of how to do it or an ability to do it by nature, to have something that's saying 20 minutes and then 5-minute break and whatever is great. But the idea, what I try to get people to go to is stop thinking about distractions as distractions.
Yeah.
Your brain is thinking about it for a reason. So engage with your distraction. If you're worried about leaving the oven on, go check the oven. If you're feeling like, oh man, I really wish I could get up and just like do some stretch, then get up and do some stretching. You got a song stuck in your head, go play that song and listen to it all the way through 3 times or whatever. Engage with. So instead of I should work this long and then take this break, it's anytime you want to, you take a break. It's just when you take a break, you set a reminder for, okay, 10-minute timer, because that's how long I want to take a break. And you go and do it. When the timer comes on, you either come back to the task or you say, no, I need more time.
Yeah.
Set another timer. Just make sure that there's always a timer getting ready to go off. Unless you're like, no, I'm not doing it at all for the rest of this day, in which case then you got to move it in your planner or however you organize things to another time. But there really is not much in the idea of forcing yourself to do things differently than you would otherwise do them. There are reasons to do that sometimes, but if you don't have a specific reason, if it's just because that's the best way to do it or that's proper or whatever, I want reasons. Otherwise, go take your break.
Yeah. Sometimes at the co-working sessions, people would drop in and after an hour they'd say, oh, I can't get this done today. I feel terrible. Nothing's happening. And we would just say, well, you got an hour done, so don't beat yourself up. You still got something done. Now go and relax and do whatever it is your brain and your body
Good
need.
for you to be that in touch with yourself to realize. Because if you spend another 2 hours trying to force yourself to do it, you just would have wasted 2 more. Like, that's good to be able to recognize, yep, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to step away.
Yeah.
Good for those people.
Exactly.
All right.
Sure.
Good to be with you.
And you. Talk to you
I will
soon.
see you next week. We'll see all of you next week. Yeah.
Have a great week.
You too. Thanks, Marie.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.